In the last hard weeks of the winter of 1841, in a trapping camp on the north side of a frozen river, a lean man in a fur cap knelt by a fire and pulled a rabbit off a green stick. The meat was hot, the meat was good. He ate every bite of it, and he ate more the next morning, and he ate more the morning after that. There were 11 men in that camp when the snow came deep in December. There were 4 of them left to walk out when the ice broke in April. And here is the thing nobody who found that camp could make sense of. The drying racks were still half full. There was meat hanging in the cold air over their heads the whole time they were dying. Not one of those men starved for want of something to eat, friend. Every one of them ate until the day he could not sit up anymore. The cold got the blame. The cold always gets the blame. The country got the blame. Hard country, far from any post. The kind of country that swallows men. But it was not the cold that emptied that camp, and it was not the distance, and it was not bad luck. It was a myth. The myth said, if you have got meat, you will not starve. The myth said, meat is meat. Fill your belly with it, and you will live. That myth has killed more trappers, more hunters, more soldiers, and lost men than any bear, any blizzard, any empty snare line on this continent. Because the men in that camp had the one thing everybody thinks they need. They had all the meat they could eat, and it killed them just the same. Here's the twist, and I want you to sit with it before we go one step further, because it is the whole spine of what I am going to hand you tonight. The meat was not the enemy. What was missing from that meat was the enemy. There is one thing your body has to have that a lean wild rabbit in late winter cannot give you, no matter how much of it you swallow. And the men who did not know that ate themselves right down into the ground with full plates in front of them. What those trappers were trying to do has a name. It is called living off the land in the cold season, feeding yourself and your people through the dead months on what the country gives you. Your great-great-grandfather could do it. He could walk into a hard winter with a knife and a few traps and come out the other side heavier than he went in, and he could do it because he knew the one rule those 11 men never learned. And I'm going to walk you through every piece of it tonight, the way it was actually done, so that you could do it too. Every piece except the fatal one. And then I am going to hand you that one last. If the truck stopped in your county tomorrow and the shelves went bare and you had to feed your family off what walks and hops through the woods behind your house, most grown men in this country would do exactly what those trappers did. They would shoot the easy game and they would eat it and they would feel clever for eating it and they would slowly get weaker on a full stomach and never once understand why. Their great-grandfathers would not have made that mistake. They knew something that has been quietly stripped out of every survival book, every prepper list, every camping show for 100 years. And that is the sovereignty we are taking back tonight, neighbor. Not just the ability to catch your own meat, the ability to catch it and actually live on it. There is a world of difference between those two things, and that difference is exactly what killed the men on the north side of that river. We will get there. Stay with me by your own choice, because this one is worth the half hour. I am Ezra Calhoun, 7th generation on this ridge. The Calhouns have held this stretch of the Ozarks, this holler, and the hills around it since the 1790s. And I've never left it a day in my life. And my grandfather Gideon raised me after the timber took my father, and before Gideon went, in the winter of 2008, at the age of 89, he made me copy every last thing he knew into a leather ledger, cowhide, 7 inches by 9, the spine sewn twice with waxed thread. This is me keeping that promise. Gideon Calhoun was born in 1919, and he fed a family off these hills straight through the Great Depression and every lean year after it. And he knew the rabbit rule the way he knew his own name, because his grandfather had watched men die for the want of it. The skill you are about to learn did not fade because it quit working. It works exactly as well today as it did the winter those 11 men went in. It faded because somebody made a fortune the day your family forgot it. And I am going to name them before we are done, and it is not who you think. By the time we finish here tonight, You will know what to do the day you are down to wild meat and a cold sky. You will know which animals are traps and which ones are salvation. You will know the season that turns good meat into slow poison. You will know the signal your own body sends you 3 or 4 days before the real trouble starts. The signal every one of those trappers felt, and none of them could read. You will know what the old-timers carried in a pouch and pulled out of a marrow bone and rendered out of a carcass to keep themselves alive. And you will know the one last piece, the piece the men in that camp were missing, the piece that turns a full belly of rabbit from a meal into a funeral. That is the through line, friend. I am not walking away from it until it is yours. Before we get into the meat of it, and I mean that plain, tap subscribe, not for me, because the buried skills we drag back into daylight around here, one a week, you are going to want the next one. And it is the very next thing your body needs when the rabbits run out. Hit that button and stay with me. There are 6 pieces to living off wild meat in the cold and coming out the other side alive. 6 in order. Miss one of the first 5 and you make yourself miserable. Miss the 6th and you go the way of the 11. Most people who ever think about this get the first 2 close enough, catching the animal, cooking the animal. That part is easy. That part is on every survival channel there is. The middle pieces are where the old journals start to disagree with the new books. But the 6th piece, the last one, is the one that has been scrubbed clean out of the survival talk for 100 years, and it is the one that is the difference between food and a grave. We build to it piece by piece. So the real question tonight is not what we forgot. It is who got rich when we forgot it and how you take the knowing back this winter. The first piece is the animal itself and understanding why the easiest meat in the woods is the most dangerous meat in the woods. Picture the country those trappers were working. Deep snow, hard cold, the big game gone, the deer yarded up miles away and thin as rails, the elk pushed down into country a man on snowshoes could not reach. But the rabbits, friend, the rabbits were everywhere. Snowshoe hares in the north, cottontails and jackrabbits everywhere else, and in a hard winter, they are the one animal a man can count on. They are thick on the ground. They run in circles when you jump them. So a patient man with a snare or a stick or an old single shot can take 3 or 4 in a day without hardly trying. They do not migrate. They do not den up for the whole season like a bear. They are right there, hopping across the snow, white on white, easy to trap, easy to shoot, easy to clean, easy to cook. And that right there is the trap inside the trap. The rabbit is the easiest calorie in the winter woods, and because it is the easiest, a hungry man builds his whole survival around it. He eats rabbit for breakfast. He eats rabbit for supper. He hangs the extras on a rack. He thinks he has solved his problem because his snares are full and his belly is full. And the whole time, the thing that is going to kill him is sitting right there on the plate. Because here is what a wild rabbit actually is under that fur. It is one of the leanest pieces of meat that walks the earth. A cottontail in the dead of winter, after months of hard living on bark and buds, is somewhere under 3% fat over its whole body. A whole rabbit, everything on it, might give you 8 grams of fat if you scrape every last bit. 8 grams, that is a spoonful. The rest of it is water and lean muscle, which is to say it is protein and almost nothing else. Now, protein is a fine thing. Your body is built out of it and your body needs it. But protein is not fuel the way fat is fuel and the way a bit of carbohydrate is fuel. Protein is the lumber, not the firewood. And a man who tries to run his whole body in the cold, doing hard work on snowshoes on nothing but lean rabbit, is a man trying to heat his cabin by burning the studs out of the walls. It works for a few days. It feels like it is working, and then it does not. And by the time it stops working, he is already in trouble he cannot see. The old-timers had a name for it, and they did not learn it from a book. They learned it from watching men die. In the North Country, the French trappers called it mal de caribou, the caribou sickness, because a man could kill a caribou in late winter, a big animal, hundreds of pounds of meat, and eat off it for a week and still waste away, because a caribou in March is as lean as a fence rail. In the English-speaking camps, they called it rabbit starvation, rabbit hunger, the lean meat sickness. Different names, same killer. A man surrounded by meat, eating all he wants, starving to death an inch at a time. The great Arctic traveler Vilhjalmur Stefansson, who lived years among the northern peoples and ate as they ate, wrote it down plain in the early part of the last century. He said a man fed nothing but lean rabbit will eat more and more, meal after meal, and grow hungrier the more he eats, and inside about a week he will have loose bowels and a headache and a heavy weariness in the body. And if he does not get fat into himself, he will die, and he will die with meat still in the pot. Stephenson nearly went that way himself more than once. He did not survive it because he was strong. He survived it because he learned the rule. So the first piece is a hard one to swallow because it runs against every instinct you have. The instinct says, meat is life, get the meat, and you are saved. But the rule says, not all meat is the same, and the easiest meat is the most likely to fool you. When you're down to wild food in the cold, the rabbit is not your salvation. The rabbit is a tool and a dangerous one, and you have got to know exactly what it can and cannot do for you before you build your life around it. The men on the north side of that river never got past this first piece. They saw meat, they saw a lot of it, and they thought the hard part was behind them. It was in front of them the whole time. Here is your first thing to carry out of tonight, and I will give you one at every piece. Learn to look at a wild animal and ask not how much meat is on it, but how much fat is on it. That one question asked before you ever build a winter around an animal is the question those 11 men never asked. It is the whole difference between the 4 who walked out and the 7 who did not. Now, the animal fools you. The next piece is the season that turns the fooling deadly, and it is the piece 9 out of 10 survival books get exactly backward because they will tell you winter is when you want the lean meat, and winter is precisely when lean meat kills. The second piece is the season, and this is where a good many folks who think they understand this get tripped because they will say to me, Ezra, people eat lean meat all the time. I eat a lean rabbit now and again, and I feel fine. And they are right. In the summer, in the fall, a lean rabbit is no threat to any man because in the summer and the fall, you have got 100 other things going into you. You have got fat off a fall deer that has been eating acorns and getting heavy for the rut. You have got fish with the oil still in them. You have got nuts, hickory and walnut and acorn dense with oil. You have got berries and roots, and the last of the garden and honey, if you are lucky, and the fat rendered off the animals you took when the taking was good. A lean rabbit in October is one small lean thing floating in a river of fat and fuel, and it does you no harm at all. But winter is a different country, friend, and late winter most of all. By late winter, every animal in the woods has been living off its own body for months. The deer are burning their last reserves. The rabbits are gnawing bark because there is nothing green. The fish are sluggish and thin under the ice. Everything that walks or swims or hops is at the leanest it will be all year, and the leanest of all is the little easy rabbit you are leaning on hardest. So the very season that drives you to live on rabbit is the exact season the rabbit has the least to give you. In the fat months, the rabbit cannot hurt you because you are swimming in fat from a dozen other sources. In the lean months, the rabbit becomes your whole diet. At the precise moment it has become pure lean protein and nothing else. That is the trap closing. That is why mal de caribou and rabbit starvation are winter sicknesses, late winter sicknesses, the sicknesses of February and March when the snow is still deep and the fat is all gone out of the country and a man is down to the one easy animal that cannot save him. I want you to hear the cruelty of the timing because it is the whole reason this killed so many and fooled so many. The sickness comes on you at the worst possible moment. You have survived the early winter. You have made it through December and January on your stores and your fat and your wits. You are proud of yourself, and you have a right to be. And then the stores run thin right when the cold is at its meanest and the days are still short, and you fall back on the one thing that is still plentiful, the rabbit, and you fall back on it hard, 3 meals a day of it, and just when you think you have found the answer, just when you feel like you have beaten the winter, that is when the lean meat sickness takes hold. It waits until you are committed. It waits until the rabbit is all you have got, and then it starts. The federal records back this, and so does every old fur company ledger a man can dig up. The Northern Post knew that a brigade sent out in late winter on short rations was a brigade in danger, not because they might find no meat, but because the meat they found would be lean, and lean meat in quantity with nothing else breaks a man down. The Hudson's Bay men did not issue their people lean meat and call it good. They issued pemmican, and I will tell you what pemmican is when we get to the fifth piece. But the short of it is this. The men who ran the fur trade, hard practical men who had to move people thousands of miles through the cold and keep them alive and working, they would not send a man out on lean meat alone. They knew better in 1790. We forgot it by 1950. So here's your second thing to carry. Mark the season. Understand that the lean months are the dangerous months and that the danger is not too little meat. It is meat with the fat gone out of it. If you ever find yourself in late winter leaning your whole survival on lean wild game, a red flag ought to go up in your mind, because that is the exact circumstance that emptied the camp on the river. The season that pushes you toward lean meat is the season lean meat turns on you. Most people who try this get it backward. They stockpile the leanest cuts for winter, thinking lean is good, thinking lean is healthy, thinking lean will keep. Wrong season for lean, friend. Winter is the season you hunt fat like your life hangs on it, because it does. Now, even in the killing season, your own body will try to warn you before the worst of it comes. And that warning is the next piece. And it is the one the men on the river all felt and none of them could read. The third piece is learning to read your own body, because your body is the first thing that knows you are in trouble. And it tells you, and if you cannot read what it is saying, you will do the exact wrong thing about it. This is the piece I want you to tattoo on the inside of your skull, because this is the one that gives you 3 or 4 days of warning before the real damage sets in. And 3 or 4 days is enough time to save your own life if you know what to do with it. Here is the first thing your body does. It gives you a hunger that eating does not touch. This is the strangest thing about the lean meat sickness, and every man who has been through it and lived describes it the same way. You eat a full meal of rabbit. You eat until your stomach is tight, and an hour later you are hungry again, not a little peckish, but deeply, gnawingly hungry, hungrier than before you ate, and it makes no sense to you because your belly is full and yet your whole body is crying out for something. So you eat more rabbit, because rabbit is what you have, and it does not help, and an hour after that you are hungrier still. That hunger is not your stomach talking. That hunger is your body screaming for fat, for fuel, for the thing the rabbit does not have, and it does not know how to ask for anything except more food. So it just keeps asking, and you just keep giving it the one food that cannot answer. The old timers called that the rabbit hunger. And when a man in a winter camp started saying he could not get full no matter how much he ate, the ones who knew would look at each other, because they knew the sickness had started. The second thing your body does, a day or two behind the hunger, is it loosens your bowels. The lean meat sickness brings on a diarrhea that will not quit. And it is not from bad meat, and it is not from a bug. It is your gut failing to handle a load of pure protein with no fat to carry it. And that diarrhea is dangerous all on its own, because now you are losing water and losing salts and losing what little strength you have, and you are still eating rabbit, and it is still not helping, and you are getting weaker on both ends at once, weaker from what you cannot use and weaker from what you cannot keep. The third thing is a heaviness, a weariness that sleep does not fix, a dull ache behind the eyes and across the temples that sits there and will not lift, a slowness in the legs on the snowshoes, a slowness in the hands at the fire, and a fog that comes into the mind so that a man stops thinking clearly, stops making good decisions, stops doing the small, careful things that keep a man alive in the cold. And that is the truly deadly part, friend, because a foggy man in hard winter makes the mistake that finishes him. He does not check the fire. He does not keep his feet dry. He lies down when he should not, and he does not get up. The lean meat sickness rarely kills a man clean and quick. It weakens him and clouds him until the cold or a fall or his own bad judgment does the last of the work, and then the cold gets the blame, and the truth goes in the ground with him. Now, here is the rule, and it is 3 lines, and I want you to hold on to them. 1. A hunger that eating does not satisfy is not a hunger for more meat. It is a hunger for fat. When you feel it, the answer is not another rabbit. The answer is fat right now, whatever fat you can find. 2. Loose bowels on a meat-only diet in the cold is not a sickness to wait out. It is the sickness we are talking about, and it will not pass on its own as long as you keep eating lean. 3. A weariness and a fog that come on after days of eating nothing but lean game are the third bell, and by the third bell, you are already in real danger, and you need fat into you that same day, not tomorrow. Rabbit hunger, loose gut, heavy fog, in that order, is the sickness announcing itself, and every hour you answer it with more lean meat is an hour you make it worse. I know these 3 bells because I felt them myself, and I will tell you the story straight, the way Gideon told it on me for years after. I was 14 and I got it into my head that I could feed myself a week off the hills alone, no stores, just my traps and my rifle, to prove I was a man. And it was late in the winter, February, and the deer were gone off to easier country, and what I could catch was rabbit. So I ate rabbit, rabbit morning and rabbit night, and I was proud of my full snares, and I was proud of my full belly, and about the 4th day I could not get full to save my life, and about the 5th day my guts turned to water, and about the 6th day I could barely drag myself up the holler, and I did not know why, because I was eating plenty. Gideon found me sitting in the snow with a fog on me, 3 fat rabbits in my bag, half starved. He did not yell. He never yelled. He built a fire, and he took a chunk of fat back he carried in his coat, pork fat, and he sat there and made me eat it, plain cold fat, and I will tell you, friend, it was the best thing I ever put in my mouth in my life. My whole body reached out for it, and inside a day I was on my feet, and inside 2 I was myself again. And Gideon looked at me and he said, "Now you know, a man can starve to death with meat in his hands. Do not you ever forget the fat." I never did. So there is your third thing to carry. Learn the 3 bells: rabbit hunger, loose gut, heavy fog, and know that the answer to all 3 is the same answer, and it is not more meat, it is fat. Now here is where I have to break the pattern for a second, friend, because everything I have told you so far, the animal, the season, the 3 bells, that is the part your great-grandmother could have taught you in an afternoon by the stove. What comes next is where it gets stripped down to the bone, where the survival books go quiet, where the real knowing has been buried the deepest. The next 2 pieces are where the men on the river were most alone, and the last piece is the one somebody spent 100 years and a great deal of money making sure you would never think about. Stay with me. The 4th piece is the false fix, and it is short and it is brutal. And I put it here on purpose because it is the exact wrong turn every one of those 11 men took. And it is the wrong turn you would take too if you did not know better. Here is the false fix. When the rabbit hunger comes on you, when you cannot get full, your body says eat, and you've got rabbit, so you eat more rabbit. That is the false fix. That is the whole trap. The sickness makes you hungrier. The hunger makes you eat more of the one thing that is causing it. And the more you eat, the sicker you get. And the sicker you get, the hungrier you feel. And round it goes, down and down, until you cannot get up. It is a wheel, friend. And once you're on it, it turns faster and faster. And it only turns one direction, and that direction is down. The cruelty of it is that eating more feels like doing the right thing. It feels like fighting. A man in that camp, feeling himself weaken, would think, I have got to eat more. I have got to keep my strength up. And he would go to the rack and pull down another rabbit and eat it. And he would feel like he was being smart, being tough, being a survivor. and every bite drove him further down. His body was begging for fat, and he was answering with lean and calling it courage. That is the false fix, and it has fooled strong, capable, experienced men because it wears the mask of common sense. More food when you are hungry. That is common sense in every other situation on earth. It is dead wrong in this one. And you can see now why this killed whole camps and not just careless individuals, because everybody in the camp is eating the same lean meat. So everybody gets the rabbit hunger around the same time. So everybody starts eating more around the same time. So everybody goes down the wheel together. There is nobody left standing to say, stop, this is a sickness. We need fat, not meat. They all believe the same false fix at once. They all eat harder as they all die faster. That is how 11 becomes 4. Not one bad decision by one weak man, but the same reasonable, deadly wrong turn taken by every man at once, because not one of them knew the rule. Here is your fourth thing to carry, and it is the hardest one because it means overriding your own gut. When the rabbit hunger has you, do not answer it with meat. I do not care how hungry you are. I do not care that meat is right there. More lean meat is the wheel, and the wheel only goes down. The moment you feel that bottomless hunger, you stop eating lean and you go find fat. And until you find fat, you're better off eating less, not more, because a smaller load of lean protein is easier on a body that is already struggling to handle it. Eat less lean, hunt harder for fat. That is the turn those 11 men needed to make and could not, because nobody had ever told them it existed. Now, if lean meat is the wheel, what is the way off it? What did the old timers actually reach for? That is the fifth piece, and it is the richest piece, because this is the knowing that kept whole peoples alive in country that should have killed them. The fifth piece is fat, where to find it, how to get it, how to carry it. And it is the piece the woodsmen of the old world were the very best at, because their lives hung on it every single winter. When you understand this piece, you will never look at a wild animal the same way again, because you will stop seeing the meat and start seeing the fat, the way a man who knows was always trained to see. Start with the parts. When you take an animal, any animal, the lean muscle, the part a modern man thinks of as the meat, the loin and the hams and the shoulders, that is the part with the least to offer you in a fat-starved winter. The fat and the fuel are in the parts most folks throw away today. The organs, first of all. The liver, the kidneys, the heart, the organs of an animal carry fat, and they carry a density of nourishment that the plain muscle does not. And the old peoples ate the organs first, prized them, fought over them, gave them to the ones who needed strength most. A modern man guts an animal and tosses the organs in the snow. A man who knew ate them before he touched the muscle. Second, the marrow. Crack the long bones, the leg bones, and inside is marrow, and marrow is fat, rich yellow fat, and a handful of marrow bones cracked and sucked and boiled will do more to save a starving man than a whole rack of lean rabbit. The old-timers boiled the bones and skimmed the fat off the top of the pot and drank it. Third, the brain. The head of an animal carries fat in the brain, and the old peoples did not waste it. Fourth, wherever the animal keeps its fat, and each animal keeps it somewhere. On a deer, it is along the back and around the organs and behind the eyes. On a bear, it is a thick layer under the hide, the best prize in the northern woods, a fat bear in the fall being about the richest thing a man could kill. On a raccoon, on a possum, on a beaver, there is fat a rabbit simply does not have. And that is the next part of this piece, choosing the fat animal over the lean one. A man who knows does not build his winter on rabbit. He builds it on the fattest animals the country holds, and he takes the rabbit only as a little something on the side. In the northern woods, the beaver was gold, because a beaver, and most of all a beaver tail, is fat, dense fat, and a trapper who had beaver had life. The bear was gold for the layer under the hide and the grease you could render from it by the gallon. Even the humble possum and the raccoon, which a lot of folks turn their nose up at, carry fat that a rabbit does not. And in a hard winter, that fat is worth more than any amount of lean. The old rule was simple. When you must choose your winter meat, choose the greasy animal over the lean one every time, even if the lean one is easier to catch. The easy meat is the trap. The greasy meat is the salvation. Those 11 men on the river had rabbits because rabbits were easy. Had they spent that same effort on beaver, on the fat animals, even a few of them, the camp might have come out whole. Now the fish. In the right water, there is fat in fish, in the oily fish, and the old peoples knew which fish carried oil and went after them in the lean season for exactly that reason. And the eggs, the roe, when they could get it, was fat and richness both. A man reading water in late winter was not just reading it for meat, he was reading it for oil. And then the greatest trick of all in this fifth piece, the one that ties it all together, is rendering and carrying your fat so that you are never caught the way those trappers were caught, with meat but no fat. This is where pemmican comes in, and I promised you I would tell you what it is, so here it is. Pemmican is the answer the old peoples worked out to the exact problem that killed the camp on the river, and it is one of the finest pieces of survival craft ever invented on this continent. You take lean meat and you dry it hard, dry it until it will keep for years, and you pound it to a powder. And then, and this is the whole secret, you take rendered fat tallow, the fat you have cooked down out of your fat animals into a clean grease, and you mix that fat into the pounded meat, roughly as much fat as meat, sometimes more fat than meat, and you press it together, and sometimes you work in dried berries, and you have made a food that is lean protein and rich fat together in one, a food that will not rot, that a man can carry 1,000 miles, that will not give him the rabbit hunger, because the fat is already in it. The Hudson's Bay Company ran its whole fur empire on pemmican. They issued it by the pound and a half a day to a working man, and a man could travel and work all winter on it and stay strong because it was the two halves of survival, the lean and the fat, married together in one cake. The men who ran the fur trade did not send their people out on rabbit. They sent them out on pemmican, on lean meat with the fat put back in, because they had learned the hard way over 200 years that lean meat alone empties camps. Let me put the rendering in your hands plain, because this is the piece of it a man can actually practice, and it is not hard, and it is the same thing your great-grandmother did without thinking twice. To render fat is only to melt it low and slow and clean it. You take the fat off your animal, the leaf fat from around the organs, the back fat, the trimmings, and you cut it small, and you put it in a pot over a low fire, low, not a hard boil, because a hard boil scorches it and turns it bitter. And you let it melt down slow, and the clear grease runs out of it, and the little bits that will not melt, the cracklings sink or float and go crisp, and you strain them off, and what you have left is a clean fat that will pour and then set up firm and white, and it will keep for months, for a year, without a cellar and without ice, because clean rendered fat does not spoil the way meat spoils. That is tallow if it comes off a deer or a cow. That is lard if it comes off a hog. That is bear grease off a bear. And a crock of it on the shelf or a lump of it in your coat is the single best insurance against the rabbit sickness that a man can carry, because it is the exact thing the meat you catch will be missing. And that is why the old trapper carried his fat on him, the way he carried his flint and his knife. A man who knew did not walk his trap line with nothing but a rifle and a hope. He carried a little rendered fat in a pouch, a lump of pemmican, a piece of fat back, some clean grease against the day. The only thing in his snares was lean. The fat animals do not come every day. The beaver is not always in the set. The bear is denned up half the year. So the man who knew took the fat when the country gave it, and he saved it, rendered and firm, and he carried a piece of that saving with him always, so that on the day he was down to lean rabbit, he could pull out his own fat and marry it to the meat right there at the fire, and eat the two together the way a body is meant to, and never once feel the rabbit hunger come on him. The 11 men on the river had rifles and traps and racks full of meat. Not one of them, so far as anybody could tell, had a pouch of rendered fat, because not one of them thought they needed it. That pouch was the whole difference. That little saved lump of grease was the line between the 4 and the 7. So here is your fifth thing to carry, and it is really 4 things braided into one. Eat the organs, the marrow, the brain, the parts most folks waste, because that is where the fat lives. Choose the greasy animal over the lean one when you have the choice. Beaver over rabbit, a fat coon over a lean hare every time. Render your fat and save it. Cook it down clean and keep it, so you always have fat in reserve when the meat you catch turns lean. And if you can, make your pemmican in the fat months against the lean ones, lean meat with the fat put back, so that you are never the man with a full rack and an empty body. That is the craft. That is what kept whole peoples alive in country that should have killed them every February. Now, here is another pattern break, friend, because we have come to the edge of the last piece, and I want you square with me before we step over it. Everything so far, the animal, the season, the bells, the false fix, the fat, most good woodsmen know some worn down version of. What comes next is the why underneath all of it. The piece of hard knowing that the survival books do not carry, and that a whole industry spent the last 100 years teaching you to fear. This is the sixth piece. This is the one the 11 men were missing. Stay with me, because this is the buried heart of the whole thing. The sixth piece, the last piece, is the reason, the thing going on inside a man's own body that makes lean meat a poison in quantity. And once you understand it, you will never be fooled again. And you will also understand why this knowing got buried, because the burying of it made certain people a great deal of money. So here it is, plain as I can make it. Your body runs on three kinds of fuel. It runs on fat. It runs on carbohydrate, the sugars and starches out of plants, and it runs a little on protein. But protein is not like the other two. When you eat fat, your body burns it clean for energy, and it is glad to have it. When you eat carbohydrate, same thing, clean fuel, easy to use. But when you eat protein, your body cannot just burn it. It has to take it apart first, and the taking apart makes a waste, a poison called ammonia, and your liver has to catch that ammonia and turn it into something your body can pass out in the water. That is work, and here is the thing that killed the 11 men. Here is the whole hinge of the matter. Your liver can only do that work so fast. There is a ceiling on it. There is a limit to how much protein a body can take apart and clean up in a day, and that limit is not very high. For a grown man, it is somewhere around 200 to 300 grams of pure protein in a day, and past that ceiling, the ammonia builds up faster than the liver can clear it, and now you have got a poison rising in your blood. Put it another way, about 35% of your energy, a little better than a third, is about all a body can safely pull from protein. Push past that, live on protein and nothing else, and you are not feeding yourself anymore. You are poisoning yourself slowly with the very thing you are eating to stay alive. Now put the rabbit back in the picture. A lean rabbit is almost pure protein. No fat to speak of, no carbohydrate at all. So a man living on rabbit is trying to get all of his energy from protein 100% when his body can only safely handle about a third of its energy that way. He is blowing through the ceiling every single day. The ammonia is rising, his liver is drowning, and his body, feeling itself running out of usable fuel, screams for more, which is the rabbit hunger, and he answers with more protein, which raises the poison higher, which is the false fix, and the loose bowels and the fog and the weakness are the signs of a body drowning in the waste of the very meat it is eating. That is mal de caribou. That is rabbit starvation. It is not starvation for lack of food. It is starvation and poisoning both at once in a man with a full belly, because the one fuel he is eating cannot be used past a certain point and turns to poison past that point. The fat would have fixed it in a day, because fat is clean fuel with no ceiling and no poison, and a few ounces of fat a day alongside that rabbit would have carried every one of those 11 men out alive. A few ounces of fat. That is all that stood between the 4 who walked out and the 7 who did not. The great travelers proved this out with their own bodies, and the records are there for any man who wants to read them. Vilhjalmur Stephenson, after all his years in the north, came back and let the doctors test it in the city under watch. In 1928, he lived a whole year on nothing but meat to prove a man could do it and stay well. And he stayed well, friend. But here is the part that matters. He did not do it on lean meat. He did it on fat meat, meat with a heavy share of fat in it, better than half his energy coming from the fat. And when the doctors testing him gave him lean meat only, the very lean, he got sick inside a couple of days, the loose bowels and the discomfort, the start of the rabbit hunger, and it cleared the moment they let him have the fat back. He proved both halves of it at once. A man can live on meat alone and thrive if the meat carries fat, and a man will sicken on meat alone and die if the meat is lean. Same animal near enough. The whole difference is the fat. The whole difference between health and the grave is the one thing those 11 trappers did not have and did not know to look for. So that is the last piece, the buried heart of it. Lean protein without fat is not food past a certain point. It is a slow poison because the liver can only clean so much of it, and the body can only run so far on it, and past the ceiling it turns on you. Fat is not the indulgence. Fat is not the thing to trim off and throw away. Fat is the fuel. Fat is the difference between eating and starving when meat is all you have. And now I am going to tell you who spent 100 years teaching you the exact opposite. And why? Because this is where it stops being an old trapping story and starts being about you tonight in your own kitchen. Because here is the bitter joke of it, friend. The men on the river did not know about the fat because nobody had taught them. But you were taught worse than nothing. Worse. You were taught to fear the very thing that would have saved them. For the last 100 years, you have been told over and over by every voice that could reach you that fat is the enemy. That animal fat especially will clog you up and stop your heart and put you in an early grave. Trim the fat. Drain the fat. Eat it lean. Lean is healthy. Lean is clean. Fat is death. You heard it from the magazines and you heard it from the television and you heard it maybe from your own doctor. And you believe it because why would you not? Everybody said it. Now let me tell you who was saying it and why. In 1911, a company put a new thing on the American shelf, a fat made not from any animal, but pressed and hardened out of cottonseed and later other seeds, a cheap factory fat. And to sell it, they had to move the American housewife off the lard and the tallow and the butter her mother had used, the animal fats, the good fats, the fats that would have saved the 11 men. So they spent the next 60 years, them and the ones who came after them, teaching this country that animal fat was backward, that animal fat was dirty, that animal fat would kill you, and that the modern, clean, healthy thing was their factory fat. And later, lean everything, lean meat, low fat, no fat. They did not do it with a law, neighbor. Nobody outlawed the lard. They did it with a marketing budget year after year until a whole nation was afraid of the fat its great-grandparents had rendered and prized and lived on. And it worked. By the end of the last century, this country had cut its use of the old animal fats to almost nothing and had learned to buy the factory fats and trim its meat down to the lean, the very lean, the rabbit lean, and to feel virtuous doing it. And then, friend, and this is the part that ought to make you set your jaw, the science caught up and quietly said the whole thing had it backward. In 2010, a study gathered the records of nearly 350,000 people and looked hard at whether the animal fat, the saturated fat, the fat you were taught to fear, actually caused the heart trouble it had been blamed for all those years. And they found no good evidence that it did. No good evidence after 60 years of being told there was nothing but. The fat was not the villain. The fat was never the villain. The fat was the fuel your great-grandparents ran on, the fuel that would have carried those trappers out of the North alive, and you were taught to pour it down the drain and buy a factory substitute and eat your meat as lean as a March rabbit. Not a conspiracy, friend. I want to be careful and honest with you the way Gideon was careful and honest with me. It was not a conspiracy. It was a market. There was money in you buying the factory fat and fearing the animal fat, and there was no money in you knowing that your grandmother's tallow crock was the healthiest thing in the house. So the knowing that would have saved 11 men on a frozen river got buried under 60 years of advertising, and you paid for the burying twice, once at the store and once in your own health. Now hold on, because I am not here to tell you to go swallow lard by the spoonful, and I am not your doctor, and your body and your ground and your health are your own to steward. What I am telling you is the plain old truth that kept men alive for 10,000 years before anybody sold anybody anything. Meat and fat together are life. Lean meat alone in quantity with nothing else is the sickness that emptied the camp on the river. Your body is built to run on the fat, and it fears the lean-only diet for good reason. And the hunger it sends you when the fat runs out is not weakness, and it is not gluttony. It is your own body, wiser than 100 years of advertising, reaching for the thing it was built to burn. Listen to that hunger. It is telling you the truth those 11 men died for want of. So let me hand you the whole of it now. Put back together the way it ought to sit in your mind, the way it sits in mine, because Gideon put it there. When you are down to wild meat in the cold, the easy animal, the rabbit, is a trap, because it is the leanest meat that walks, and you will lean on it hardest exactly when it can help you least. The lean months are the killing months, late winter most of all, when every animal is at its leanest and the fat is gone out of the whole country. Your own body will warn you. 3 bells in order: a hunger that eating will not fill, a loosening of the bowels, and a heavy fog on the body and the mind. And the answer to all 3 bells is the same, and it is fat, not meat. The false fix, the wheel that only turns down, is to answer that hunger with more lean meat. And you must not. You must eat less lean and hunt harder for fat. And the fat is in the parts folks waste, the organs and the marrow and the brain, and in the greasy animals folks pass over, the beaver and the bear and the coon, and in the grease you render and save against the lean days, and in the pemmican, the old people's made by marrying the lean back to the fat. And underneath all of it is the reason, the last piece, that lean protein without fat is a poison past a certain amount, because your liver can only clean so much of it and your body can only run so far on it. And fat is the clean fuel with no ceiling, the fuel you were built for, the fuel you were taught to fear by people who profited from your fear. That is the whole skill. That is what your great-great-grandfather knew, and the 11 men did not. And now it is yours. This was never really about rabbits, friend. It was about being a person who cannot be fooled by his own full belly. It was about the difference between a man who can catch meat and a man who can actually live on what he catches, and that difference is 100 years of buried knowing that you just dug back up in the last half hour. If the trucks stop, you will not just fill your snares and feel clever and slowly go down the wheel like those trappers did. You will know to hunt the fat. You will know to crack the marrow and eat the liver and render the grease and choose the greasy animal over the easy one. You will know the 3 bells when your body rings them, and you will answer them right. That is not doom talk, and that is not fear. That is the ordinary competence your great-grandmother had. Standing at her stove with a crock of tallow she was not the least bit afraid of, that got quietly taken from you and that you just took back tonight. You do not have to master the whole of it this week, friend. Do one thing. This week, when you cook your meat, whatever meat you have, do not trim the fat off and throw it away out of an old fear that was sold to you. Save it. Render a little of it down in a pan, cook it clean, and understand in your hands what fat actually is, that it is not the enemy your whole life told you it was, that it is the fuel that carries a body through the cold. And if you are a hunting man this fall, when you take your deer, do not waste the fat, and do not waste the organs, and do not waste the marrow. Learn them, handle them, put back into your own life the parts 100 years of advertising taught you to throw in the ditch. That is the whole first step. That is your first crack at the marrow bone. Your grandfather knew all of this. Somebody just did not get the chance to hand it down to you. That is what I am here for. Tell me down below, neighbor, did your people ever talk about the lean meat sickness, the rabbit hunger, the caribou sickness, by whatever name it went by in your country? Did your grandmother keep her fat and render her lard and pay no mind to the folks who said she should not? Did your grandfather choose the fat animal over the easy one when the winter got hard? Different regions carried this knowing in different words, and the story that gets the most comments down there is the one I go deepest on next. Your great-great-grandfather fed a family through a winter on this exact knowing. Now you can too. Do not let it die on your watch. And before you go, one more, because it is the very next piece your body needs when the fat and the fresh meat run thin. Next time we are going after the drying rack, and the one mistake in drying your winter meat that looks like nothing that every man thinks he already knows, that put whole families in the hospital as recently as the 1990s, and that the old books still get wrong to this day. There is a temperature in it that everybody quotes, and everybody quotes it wrong. And the getting of it wrong is the difference between meat that keeps you alive and meat that lays you low. If you want that one, and you are going to want that one, tap subscribe, because we are pulling these old skills back into daylight one at a time, and there are more of you every week doing it with me. And that matters more than you know. Keep the old ways, they kept us.